Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 14th of December, and as always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information. You can do that easily by calling us at the Alaska Weather Information Line, 1-800-472-0391. And when you get the number and the information, write down the numbers you're using if you haven't used that before. Keep that by the phone. It becomes a handy resource for dialing a little bit faster the next time. You certainly don't have to listen to the weather prompts each time. Now, for many of us, weather.gov/Alaska is probably bookmarked on your phone. You can simply swipe up and add that to your home screen and use that over and over again. Or type in mobile.weather.gov and save the information that you get that way. And that becomes a handy resource on your mobile device. As long as you've got good service there, that should work just fine. And on your email, david.snider@noaa.gov is an easy way to find a little help when you need it there. If there's something that you can't find, something that you'd like to see more of here on the show, perhaps a comment or suggestion about how we could do things differently, whether it's just your forecast or the Alaska Weather Show, I'm happy to listen to you and help to solve your problems as much as I am able. I am here to serve you. Here's a look at the Alaska weather we have around the region tonight. The hazardous weather across the Chukchi Sea is mainly a winter weather advisory for snow falling and snow blowing, but we're not looking at blizzard conditions anymore. So conditions across the North Slope have eased up and improved a little bit, so blizzard warnings have been dropped. And for that matter, across the Alaska Range and points in between, there are no more wind advisories or high wind warnings across the region. So improving weather to be had across all of the region, really, as we go ahead. However, the overall weather pattern really has not changed much, so we are still dealing with a pretty potent southerly flow. The low-pressure system across the Gulf is working its way northward right now, trying to spread some snow into south central and across the Copper River Valley and parts of the interior. Southeast still dealing with some rainfall across the region today as that front moving through. Periods of strong winds and maybe some gusty conditions at times, but overall really not a whole lot has changed. Out across the north, you can still see we're in that general easterly flow across the coastal plain. The effect of that has not only been moving snow and creating snow across some of the lower terrain there, but it's also moving the ice in a substantial way out of the Beaufort, where it started growing as usual. But now that's been moving into the Chukchi Sea. So you'll want to take a look at the sea ice analysis coming up here in just a few minutes. Make sure you stick around for that. If you have interest in the Chukchi Sea and the Bering Strait, you'll certainly want to see that update coming up in the marine segment. As we look out across the west, you can see another area of low pressure working its way over Shemya. This is going to encourage another round of rain to pass through and rain and snow to follow back behind that. Wave right now working through the eastern Aleutians and into the Alaska Peninsula is producing rain and has enough warm air with it that as we get into tonight and tomorrow, there may be some mixed areas of rain and snow, perhaps even a glaze of ice there as that's moving into the lower terrain of the YK Delta. So several areas are tapping into this rich flow of moist air and certainly warmth that's being brought up by a substantial southerly flow in the jet stream. You'll see that in the aviation section here in a minute. But one thing to keep an eye on is where that ridge has been setting up. Remember, that's that upside down shaped U pattern that we've had across the west coast. And it's been oriented as such over the Gulf and over southeast, and it seems to be shifting westward a little bit more now. So that's going to take some of the weather that's already passed many of you and kind of bring that back just a little bit more. So conditions are changing a little bit, but overall, the big weather pattern is still deep southerly warm flow aloft coming into Alaska. So here's where we start our day. Today's weather shows low pressure just outside of Prince William Sound. This whole system is creeping north and northwest a little bit here. The front is passed through southeast, periods of rain across northern parts of the Panhandle and around the northern Gulf Coast and southern parts of southeast. We're seeing some reports of snow across the higher terrain in the Copper River Valley, and then up north across the coastal plain with high pressure sitting across places like Arctic Village, 1,004 millibars. This isn't really going to be enough to stop weather systems from moving in across the west. 995 millibar low outside of Kotzebue Sound. That's drawing in that stronger easterly flow and at times creating what look like could be blizzard conditions. Again, winter weather advisory now for the Chukchi Coast. Conditions should not be quite so bad. And across the Alaska Peninsula, look for areas of rain. A 984 millibar low just outside of Bristol Bay. The next front there out to the west attached to a 972 millibar low across the southern Bering Sea and the western chain. As we go ahead till tonight, remember we were talking about some of that warmer air situated across southwest. This is moving eastward and into land at 970 millibars. The triple point a little bit further south will have a much better chance of creating some pockets of heavier rainfall. And the pressure gradient is going to tighten up here across the western Gulf, and another wave of rain pushes ashore into southeast, and once again, stronger winds and some occasional gusts should be expected, especially across some of the channeled terrain there. The low pressure system is not terribly strong, but the onshore flow continues for you, so you'll still have a continued threat for some rain showers and likely some snow along the higher terrain. That could mean a better chance of maybe making things pretty there up across some of the southeastern hilltops there. As you look across the eastern interior and parts of south central, look for some areas of light snow to continue as we head through tonight, maybe some rain and snow around Prince William Sound. More clouds than snow likely around places like Fairbanks, however, and out to the west, more clouds, and some of that even breaks up as you get out towards Seward and the northern parts of the YK Delta. The front across the coastal plain is still sitting there, keeping that pressure gradient kind of packed in. That means that easterly flow may be a little breezy, if not gusty at times, and again, that winter weather advisory will be in effect for the Chukchi Coast. As we go through Friday, there's really no reason to say it won't be breezy up across the northwest slope, but it looks like conditions may ease up just a little bit as we go through the day. But a look out to the west shows low pressure sitting off the YK Delta at 970 millibars. This becomes the stronger part of the next weather system, and you can see how wrapped up that is across the central and western Bering. It will be breezy for the central and eastern chain with rain showers there, if not steady rain at all. Periods of rain and snow around the Pribilofs, and it looks like snow and maybe a mixture of that around the Cook Inlet region should be possible. There's the triple point, and again, usually this is where we key in on some of the heavier rainfall and strongest lift in parts of the storm. We still have an onshore flow for parts of southeast, but you might get a little bit of a break as that ridge is trying to set up right over southeast. Let's jump ahead on into Saturday, and the front by this point will be moving into southeastern Alaska. We still have an onshore flow, and there will still be periods of rain for a large part of southeast. Across south central, watch for areas of light snow there, and around Prince William Sound, periods of rain and snow should be expected. Light rain continues for parts of Kodiak, but once again, the pressure gradient here is fairly tight, so winds will be moving fairly quickly across the north and western Gulf and to some extent southeastern Alaska. Notice up north, we still have a tight pressure gradient here, so there will be areas of snow forming and snow blowing there, so watch out for more alerts should that worsen. Out across the west, we have a pretty good gradient going here across the Alaska Peninsula all the way out through the central and eastern chain, and several waves of low pressure will actually encourage that even more for places like the Pribilofs and channel terrain across the peninsula itself. One new item is the ridge of high pressure that tries to establish itself here across the northern Pacific region. We'll see how far that can go. But not a whole lot of hope for a big change in the weather pattern. And I'll show you the climate outlook here for the next 2 weeks here in just a minute. But let's start with temperatures for tonight. As you look at Friday morning, to get us started, 30s and 40s for parts of southeast, 20s and 30s for many areas in south central, about 35 in Cordova, 14 in Fairbanks, 5 for Arctic Village, 3 in Barrow, 13 around Nome, and looks like Bethel will make it into the lower 20s with many in the Bristol Bay region hovering near 30 degrees, mid to upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, and mid-30s for the central chain. As we get into the afternoon tomorrow, it's still going to be pretty warm for parts of south central out to southwest. You're looking at temps in the mid to upper 30s, maybe even a few 40s in the region like Homer and Kodiak, all the way out toward Cold Bay and Falls Pass, Sand Point. Low to mid 40s at least for southeast. Remember that warm onshore flow continues for you. In Eagle, look for a high of 23, 7 in Barrow. Looks like Arctic Village would be about 14. Bethel's near 20 degrees. Tanana closer to 26 and 23 around the Golden Heart City and Fairbanks there. 36 in St. Paul. As we get into your morning on Saturday, expect temperatures to hover in the mid to upper teens around the central parts of the interior and the middle Tanana Valley. South Central, you're still looking at temps close to freezing, maybe even above for many in the Kenai Peninsula. Prince William Sound near 37 degrees around Cordova. Upper 30s to low 40s for many in southeast. Fort Yukon 6. Looks like Galena, you're looking at 16 degrees. Many in the YK Delta in the interior, like McGrath, and northward into the upper Kuskokwim, you're probably talking about 25 degrees or maybe a little colder as you head out toward the coast. 28 around Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island, Gamble, and Savunga, mid-20s for you. The Alaska Peninsula and the Central Chain still in the 30s. By the afternoon on Saturday, expect high temperatures back in the low 20-degree range for the middle Tanana Valley. Eastward colder, Northway only 7 by the afternoon. Single digits are back for the coastal plain. Kaktovik, look for 8. Wainwright near 3, 2 in Barrow. Point Hope and Point Lay, single digits to mid-teens there. Kotzebue and Shishmaref in the lower 20s, 25 in Nome. For the YK Delta, mid to upper 20s, lower 30s as you head into Bristol Bay. 40 in Kodiak, one of the warmer spots there across some of the southern coast. And again, many in southeast in the low to mid 40s, with the Alaska Peninsula still in the 30s. Let's take a look at climate predictions though for the next 8 to 14 days. This is the temperature outlook, and you can see all of Alaska is above normal here, with the best chance for significantly above normal temperatures across central and western sections of southern Alaska. So it looks like things will be warmer than normal if you buy the statistics there. As we get into the precipitation outlook, drier conditions than normal. There's a significant chance for that across southeast. But as you look out across the west, there is a very good signal that outlooks are pointing to above normal and wetter or snowier conditions. It could be rain or snow, but chances are with the warm conditions, there's going to be some more rain out in this region at least. There will be wetter than normal for that 8 to 14 day period. You can check this out anytime by heading to climate.gov. Now, as we look ahead, we'll keep you advised of any new warnings, watches, or advisories that develop.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather now, IFR conditions will spread into the middle and upper Yukon Valley. You'll find them across the Chugach Range around Valdez into Cordova and the higher train of southeast, including areas around Yakutat and a large part of the southwest coast and into Norton Sound, as well as the North Slope. By Friday afternoon, IFR conditions will be lingering across some of the central and western interior, as well as inside of Norton Sound and across the Kuskokwim valleys there, as well as Prince William Sound, the Alaska Range, and a large part of the higher train of southeast, with MVFR widespread across most of southeast and IFR all the way across the North Slope, again with ongoing wind and snow there. MVFR for the Bering Strait. A look for IFR conditions again across the North Slope as we get into Saturday morning, and you'll find that a little bit more across the south-facing slopes of the eastern Brooks Range, also across the YK Delta, the Alaska Range, and into Bristol Bay region. And a large part of southeast now will be covered up with IFR conditions, with MVFR out across Kodiak Island and most of the Gulf. By Saturday afternoon, IFR is fairly widespread across the Alcan border, the Alaska Range, and parts of the interior, and surrounding Cook Inlet, though most of Cook Inlet might still be at VFR there for Saturday afternoon. IFR lingering across the northern and even southern sections of southeast, especially down south, with MVFR across the outer coast. Nunivak Island, the Pribilofs, all the way up to St. Matthew, and most of the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and the Chain. So a lot more to come. Let's take a look at your pass conditions now. Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass, we expect to start out at VFR, but a lean over toward IFR conditions should be expected as we go through your Friday there. VFR in the morning again. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass will see a similar start. VFR conditions may begin your Friday, but by the end of the day, conditions should worsen, so visibility may decrease in some of your favorite passes there. Rainy Pass expected to lean over toward IFR conditions. Windy Pass expected to start at MVFR, but transition to IFR. Isabel Pass, we expect to see a change toward IFR conditions there. Mentasta Pass probably holds at MVFR. To the north and east, it looks like VFR conditions, but just to the south, expect even lower ceilings and visibility. Dehne Pass, we also expect to see IFR in the area, but right now the pass looks to be MVFR to start and finish your day. And for Portage Pass, IFR conditions are expected most of Friday. Chilkoot and White Pass also should hold at IFR conditions through most of the day. The freezing levels now, not a big change out west at all. The surface freezing line right between St. Matthew and the Pribilovs. Down across the Bristol Bay region, the surface freezing line right over Lake Iliamna and King Salmon and Dillingham. Just to the south, you can see the next nudge of warmer air working its way up toward Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula with levels to about 2,000 to 4,000 feet. The 2,000-foot freezing level also holding closer to Gustavus, just east of Sitka, right over Petersburg, Wrangell, and then south and east through the Clarence Strait there. As we get into the icing potential, you'll notice the levels have come up a little bit more. Levels around 3,000 feet and above for the south-facing slopes of the Brooks Range. Not expecting significant icing across the north slope thanks to ongoing blizzard conditions there today. Across southwest and south central, above 5,000 to 10,000 feet, and you can see the levels coming up there as you move out over the Gulf, and between about 3,000 and 6,000 feet across the southern Bering, the Pribilovs, the Chain, and into the north and western Gulf, above 6,000 feet there. The jet stream really hasn't changed its position except for one part. The main storm track coming out of the North Pacific is still just driving strong, 135 to 150 knots, but the ridge has retrograded just a little bit. And that's significant because that means that big push of moisture now is a little bit further west and is changing its orientation away from southeast and is now backed up just a little bit more. So we're still in the same weather pattern, but the orientation of that fire hose has changed just a little bit. At 9,000 feet, you can see south and westerly flow over the Gulf. That has not changed, 40 to 60 knots there. Southerlies coming up over the Kenai Peninsula and Kodiak Island between 20 and 30 knots. Low pressure across the Bering Sea, one of those systems right over Nunivak Island with strong wind speeds from the south over the YK Delta at 55 knots, and northerlies on the backside of that 50 to 55 knots. At 3,000 feet, southerlies are also a little bit stronger here across the open waters of the Gulf, 60 to 65 knots. The ridge, again, right over southeastern Alaska, 10 to 30 knots across the interior from the south, and then a hard push from east to west across the western interior, looking for 20 to 50 knots there, and south and westerlies across the chain, anywhere from 50 to 55 knots. Turbulence then is going to focus on the Alaska Range, South Central, Prince William Sound, the YK Delta, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, and the chain below 8 to about 9,000 feet and out over the Gulf. Southeast right now, not looking for any widespread turbulence. You might catch a little bit of that across the Chukchi Coast up to Barrow below 4,000 feet, but do expect to see considerable moderate across a large part of the YK Delta and some of the higher terrain. We'll be back with your Marines in just a moment.
Life and Death of Tycho Brahe.
Greetings, stargazers. I'm James Albury, director of the Kika Silva Pla Planetarium in Gainesville, Florida.
And I'm Dehne Regas, astronomer from the Cincinnati Observatory. We're here to help you find your way around the sky. Hey James, how would you classify most astronomers? Are they nerdy, odd, eccentric?
Well, I know you are, but what am I?
Well, nerdy, odd, and definitely eccentric. But we're not boring, are we?
No way. Our lives are filled with excitement of the universe, seeing eclipses, planetary conjunctions, meteor showers.
I think so too, but in case you were thinking that all astronomers are dull, this week we're going to take a closer look at the most interesting man in the world. Well, at least for the late 1500s.
We're talking about Tycho Brahe, the best naked-eye astronomer who ever lived, and one fellow who had a rather colorful life.
That's an understatement. Some of Brahe's accomplishments include getting his nose cut off in a duel, having a pet elk, a clairvoyant jester named Jep, and
how he died.
OMG, wait until you hear about that. Let's take you to Denmark in the year 1572. Okay, we have our sky set to November 11th, 1572. Our soon-to-be astronomer Tycho Brahe was coming home when he looked up, as he often did, and noticed an extra star in the familiar constellation of Cassiopeia the Queen.
This new star, or nova, was hard to miss. Brahe watched it for weeks, and he could even see it during the daytime. It was that bright. He wrote a book on his observations and became one of the most famous astronomers in Europe.
We call Brahe's nova the supernova of 1572. It was the result of a massive star exploding suddenly. We haven't had a supernova like it since 1604.
Now, let's give you the dirt on Tycho Brahe. When he was a child, his uncle kidnapped him, but his parents didn't seem to mind. They were like, fine by us, you raise him.
Tico then inherited a ton of money and developed a reputation for being a tad eccentric. Beyond the long mustache and the fancy clothes, he also wore a metal prosthetic nose.
This was not a fashion trend. Tico had the tip of his nose cut off in a duel. Apparently, he'd been having a long-standing mathematical argument.
Wait, I'm sorry. Did you just say a mathematical argument?
Yes, and so they finally decided to settle it with swords. Brahe survived, but his nose didn't.
Brahe built a state-of-the-art observatory/castle on the island of Dehne, which he ran as a petty dictator. Every night for 20 years, he observed the sky. Now, this was before the invention of the telescope, so he made his measurements with the naked eye and some quadrants of his own design.
He amassed mounds of data and created the best catalog of astronomical knowledge. It led him to an interesting conclusion. The planets did not go around the sun like Copernicus said, but they didn't all go around the Earth either.
He created a hybrid system where the Earth stayed still while the Moon and Sun orbited it. Then the other planets, known at the time, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, orbited the Sun, which then orbited the Earth.
It seemed crazy and was wrong, but the Tychonic system seemed to work. Brahe threw elaborate parties at the castle and paraded around his pet elk.
And one night, the elk got drunk, fell down the steps, and died. Later, Brahe was kicked off his island, and the residents destroyed the castle. In 1600, he employed the brilliant mathematician Johannes Kepler as an assistant.
Brahe was suspicious of Kepler and wouldn't give him all of his data right away. Kepler became increasingly frustrated, and suddenly, Brahe died.
That's suspicious. Would Kepler have killed Brahe just for some info?
Some historians considered that a possibility. Kepler said that Brahe died of stomach problems, but can you trust him?
So, in 2010, they dug him up and examined the body and found Brahe died of a burst bladder.
You mean?
Yes, he held his pee too long and it burst.
Gross and too weird.
So that is the interesting life and bizarre death of the strangest astronomer to walk the Earth.
Tycho Brahe discovered so much of the universe, and you can too if you go to the bathroom regularly and keep looking up.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Time for a quick check of your sea ice edge. Once again, the Beaufort Sea has closed up, about a week or so ago now. And out across the west, we've seen that easterly movement slowly pushing, or advecting is the scientific name for that movement, ice to the west. And you can still see there's some lower concentration areas, probably even some open water there in that blue section, where concentration is below 80%. But what a difference in just 24 hours. When you get a good look at the satellite picture, you can clearly see that there's a lot more ice in the Chukchi, and a lot of that is sliding down toward the Bering Strait. The ice is continuing to fill in outside of Kotzebue Sound and move westward as well. There are still some areas that have some lower concentration ice right along the coast, but all that is also moving westward and reforming ice across the coast. So watch for continued growth to the west and changes to come, but that's the latest sea ice analysis from the Alaska Sea Ice Program. You can check it out anytime, weather.gov/Anchorage/ice. Here's a look at southeast, and the south and easterly flow continues up the inner channels there. Will be some stronger gusts, even as sustained winds are down. Gusts could reach up to 35 knots, 20 knots from the south across the Lynn Canal, southeasterlies in the Clarence Strait, and an onshore flow south of Sitka out toward Craig with 12 to 13 foot seas there, and a south and southeasterly flow heading up the Gulf with 12 to 13 foot seas there on a 20 to 25 knot wind. By Saturday, you can see the flow picking up once again. Higher seas out across the Gulf. Some of those could reach above 20 to 25 feet. South and easterly winds pick up across the inner channels, looking for some stronger gusts there in the 40 to 45 knot range. The onshore flow could be sustained there at 35 knots with about 16 to 18 foot seas as you head into Saturday. Across South Central, easterlies in Prince William Sound, 30 knots with a 7-foot sea. North and easterlies coming down Cook Inlet, 6 to 8 foot seas expected there. And west of the Barren Islands, you're talking about 16-foot seas with a 45-knot wind. Southeasterlies there across Resurrection Bay and outside, 35 to 40 with 15 to 16-foot seas as we head into Friday. For Saturday, the flow shifts to the west and southwest with the higher seas again in the central and eastern Gulf as we just saw. Southeasterlies in Prince William Sound. And you're looking for a westerly flow coming into Cook Inlet and into the Kenai Peninsula at 20 knots with a 4 to 6 foot sea, with northwesterlies in the northern part of the inlet with 4 foot seas around Anchorage. For Friday, across Bristol Bay, a southeasterly flow, 40 knots with 9 foot seas. Southwesterlies moving toward Kodiak Island and parallel to the Alaska Peninsula at 35 knots. 17 foot seas expected there. Easterlies inside of Shelikof Strait could bring 8 foot seas on a 35 knot wind. Look for 20 knots and 6 foot seas there in Shelikof Strait by Saturday. Westerlies crossing the Alaska Peninsula with a tight pressure gradient. And higher seas just to the south and offshore, but you're looking at 22 to 24 foot seas there across the coast and 5 to 12 foot seas along the Bering Sea coast for Saturday. Across the Aleutians, a west and northwesterly flow should be expected in the western chain, 21 foot seas between Kiska and Adak. Look for a 20 to 24 foot sea between Nikolsky and Atka and Adak. 12 to 16 foot seas across the Bering Sea coast, and about 30 to 35 knot winds are expected there. As we get into Saturday, a west and northwesterly flow should be expected, 30 to 35 knots, and about 23 to 26 foot seas expected there on Saturday. Across the west coast, northeasterlies coming over Norton Sound there. That'll be over the ice, of course. Northeasterlies through the Nunivak Island area, easterlies through the Kuskokwim Delta, and southeasterlies through St. Paul and St. George. Northeasterly winds there around St. Matthew Island are also expected. And northerlies coming through St. Lawrence Island, about 30 knots with an 8 to 10 foot sea there as we get into Saturday. Northwesterlies also from St. Matthew Island all the way down toward the Pribilofs, 30 knots with a 17 foot sea will be the standard there as we go through your afternoon. Easterly offshore flow though through Norton Sound. For Friday, look for an east and northeasterly flow through the Beaufort Seacoast, 15 to 20 knots. Look for an east and northeasterly wind coming down the Chukchi coast. Again, that's going to be over the ice, so it's going to be a little colder there, and ice is filling in across the Chukchi Sea. Look for a northeasterly wind there to turn around to more of a northerly flow just south of the Bering Strait as we get into your Saturday there. 30 knot wind there around Cape Lisburne and Point Hope. Recapping tonight's weather, a cold front will sag across the coastal plain. Look for some stronger winds and a period of winter weather advisory conditions there for the Chukchi coast should be expected. No blizzard warnings are in effect at this point. Low pressure is moving across the southern Bering Sea as that front moves closer to the YK Delta. Winds are going to pick up and periods of rain and snow should be expected. May see a little bit of light snow around south central, and an onshore flow will keep rain falling across southeast. Watch for a breezier day to set up as we head into Friday and Saturday, especially this weekend. And you might get a little more mountain snow around some parts of southeast as we get into Saturday. Periods of blowing snow may be possible across some parts of the western interior, and periods of rain and snow for Bristol Bay, and a better chance of snow in south central. Thanks for watching.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.